first ship that went into Japan after they shot bombed the big Hiroshima and whatever the other place was, and our ship came in there, and then we were there for a week or two, and then of course we went on back to the United States, and then we and of course I want to back up and tell that along the way that after we were when I was in junior college there, before the war, just before the war started, I was in the room there, in the library, talking like you're not supposed to do. But I was 2 or 3 other guys in the back, kind of in the back, and a guy named Paul Gray, and he asked me. He said, "Are you? Do you have a date? Have you had a date with this gal?" What was it? Her name was, he said was, I can't think of it right now. I said, no, I don't know who you're talking about. And so he said, well, I said, I can get anybody, I can get a date with anybody that I want to. So, and he said, well, I bet you can't get one with this gal. And I said, well, I bet for $5, I'll bet you on that. And that was back $5 was worth like $100 back in those days. So I said, so the next day we were back in the library again, and this gal, we were talking again to Paul and 2 or 3 guys, and she came, and this gal came up to the front of the thing to take a book in there. So I said, hey, he said that's the one we're talking about. This one called Queenie. They call her Queenie. The reason they call her Queenie, he said, was because she was the queen of the school for 2 or 3 things that was important at Benton High School. So anyway, so I when she said, well, that's the girl we're talking about, and I said, I'll go get my date, my $5 bet right now. So I went and caught her, and she came down into the locker room, and she was putting her stuff in the stuff, and I walked along there, and I took a hold of her, and I sweet lip, and at the same time I snapped her brassiere strap, and she shot. Was quite impressed, and so I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, somebody said you might want to have a date." And she said, "Well, do you dance?" And I said, "Well, a little bit." And said, "Well, when do you want to do it?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty booked up with that. Let's do it like a week and a half. That'll be next Friday night." And I said, "That's good enough." Well, anyway, so then time went on there, like a year later, that we had some dates and stuff, and then we went to after the war was over, and we went to, like we were saying, we went to the Pearl Harbor deal, and we went I went to lots of places in the Pacific, and finally we wound up in Japan, and so then when we were we had some drinks in a bar in, I think it was Manila, I think it was, and I mentioned to somebody said, "What are you going to do now that the war's over?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'll just get married." And I said, "Well, who in hell would marry you?" And I said, "Well, I have about 12 of them that are waiting on me." And somebody said, "Well, I'll bet you $5 you can't even get one." And I said, "Well, that's another bill. I'll take that bill." So I sent a cablegram to Norm, and it said, "Hi, sweet lips. How about getting married when I get back home?" And so then, and she hadn't even responded with me for 6 months, because I didn't like messing with letters and stuff. So anyway, sure enough, I did show up, and she was in California then, and our ship was in California. So we we met each other, at the airport, and I said, well, how about uh, my cablegram about getting married? She said, so we had a little discussion about it, and I said, well, there's about 4 billion people in the world, and half of them are males and half of them are females, so we don't have to get married to each other. So we either do it right or we don't do it at all. And so she said, so we went to a restaurant there and talked about it, and I wrote down the stuff that I suggested on if we got married. So I wrote this stuff down, and so she said I told her that mainly that we'd probably have about 10 kids, and we were she was kind of an atheist then, and I was Catholic, and that we wouldn't have any problems if we wouldn't have any disputes over the kids on being Catholic, and so she said that was fine, and I said, well, what's your after I've written all this stuff, I said, what is your requirements? And she said, well, the day that we get married, I don't have to work anymore outside of the house. And she said, well, that's good enough for her. So I said, and she hasn't since then. She's never had a job since then.
So was that a verbal deal, or did y'all write that down somewhere?
That was that handshake deal. That was it, right. And I said, that's what it was. We had a handshake there, and I said, that's good enough. So then we got a priest in Los Angeles and got married in the back room, and then we and I was still on the Navy I still wasn't released yet, so for about 6 months. So I got we made I got got Norm booked in on the ship, and we went up to Oregon somewhere to get the ship put away, and I guess that was the first female that was ever put on as being high in the service. So anyway, since then here we are. It's 53 years later, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
Is it still running?
Yeah, hang on just a second. Okay, so now you had all these bets with these guys that you could get these dates with all these gals, with Queenie and Norm and all this other stuff. So did you consider yourself a Don Juan of the armed services?
Well, in fact, I have a picture here of me at that time, and I'm supposed to be the best-looking guy in the United States in service in that time.
Yeah. Well, what's the picture look like?
Well, here it is right here. This is a picture of me when I was in the service, when I was back then, and I if you look, you'll notice I was the best-looking guy in town.
Yeah, I still see the resemblance there.
In fact, I had some young gal ask me just a couple of days ago if told me that I was still the best-looking guy in town.
Yeah, so there's a rumor floating around town that you even had some of the other sailors hitting on you. Is that true?
Oh yeah. I always had a few queers that were pester me, and I was always nice about it, but I just kept on going.
So the old "don't ask, don't tell" was alive and well in World War II then.
That's right. It's still around.
Yeah. So when the LST went to Japan, what part of Japan did you land in?
Oh, in Tokyo.
You went to Tokyo?
Yeah.